In the 1972 children's classic, Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day, it opens like this. I went to sleep with gum in my mouth, and now there's gum in my hair. And when I got out of bed this morning, I tripped on the skateboard, and by mistake I dropped my sweater in the sink while the water was running. I could tell it was going to be a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. The last time I did one of these Bible studies for the rest of us, we looked at the Old Testament story of Elijah and the broom tree. So if you remember, it's been a few weeks, but Elijah laid down next to the broom tree and begged God, would you just let me die? And so today I want to continue that conversation with a look at a different Old Testament character, Job. So I'm going to call this Job and a Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. In chapter 3 of the book by the same name, Job, he spends an entire chapter lamenting, crying, whining, whatever you want to call it. Job was cursing the very day that he was born. Have you ever been there? My life is in ruins, he said. Let darkness come and let no light shine forth. I should have died in my mother's womb. Now, listen to this beautiful, melancholy piece of scripture from Job 3:13 through 16. This is in the King James, so bear with me. When thoughts arise in visions of the night, when falls on mortals vision seeing sleep, great fear did come on me and trembling dread. It made my very bones to stand in awe, and o'er my face there then did pass a breath, which made my very hair to stand on end. It stopped. But nothing could I then discern. It looked, and lo, an image without form. Silence. And then I heard a voice. If ever there's been a human who understood the valley of the shadow of death, it was Job. Everything had been taken from him. His livestock, which was his livelihood, his family, his health. Job was at the very end of a very frayed rope. Desperate. Depressed, I think. So anxious that every cell in his body was trembling with fear. It makes me think about the first time I ever had a panic attack at work. I was a dispatcher in a 911 call center. Everyone there knew my dad. My dad, the hometown hero, the career firefighter, EMT in the same town where I grew up and worked. And I didn't know what was happening at first, but in the middle of the call, my heart started racing. I felt incredibly dizzy. My hands were sweating. My chest grew tight, and I couldn't respond to the emergency caller on the other end of the line. And my partner, who was sitting right next to me, looked at me and said, "Man, you're pale." The supervisor grabbed my headset and said, "Go to the bathroom." I locked the stall door, which was a bad idea, and I pulled off my shirt. I sat on the toilet, and I wasn't sure if I was going to throw up or what was about to happen, but my stomach was churning. I became so desperate that I finally laid down on the cold tile floor in the fetal position, my bare skin against that cold tile office bathroom floor. And after what felt like an eternity, it was about 15 minutes, my symptoms began to subside, and I got up and I answered the door for my supervisor, who was standing there a bit shocked to see me shirtless and sweating from head to toe. I was dazed, and I don't think she quite knew what to say. So I put my shirt back on, and she called me in her office. I sat on the couch, I rested for a while, and we talked through what happened. And this supervisor was also an EMT. She recognized immediately the classic signs of a panic attack. I had assumed I was having a heart attack at the age of 24. She instead sent me home to rest for the rest of the shift, and she urged me to call my doctor first thing in the morning. I apologized profusely, and that job lasted about 3 more months. I couldn't handle the pressure of the job. I couldn't handle the all-night shifts, and I was humiliated by this sort of living diagnosis that my coworkers had witnessed. I said in From Pastor to a Psych Ward that mental illness is no respecter of persons. Anxiety and depression, they are equal opportunity tormentors. They don't care what kind of day or week you're having. They don't care who your mom is or your dad or what degree you have or how often you help little old ladies cross the street. They don't give a damn. And along with mental illness comes shame. And shame whispers things like, you can't get your shit together, so stop writing. That's what it tells me. Fear deals in extremes like always and never. It tells lies like, you are crazy and this will never get better. You are a loser and this will only get worse. It will never get better. It will always be this way. Fear and shame do their damnedest to convince you that this is how things will always be. This 15-minute window of your life. This is how it will always be. But fear and shame are liars. And you don't have to listen to them. If I've learned anything in the past 7 years of recovery, it's that I can face incredibly hard days, incredibly hard seasons, and not be destroyed by them or defined by them. I've had other panic attacks since that day at 24 at the 911 center. Panic attacks don't care where you are, who you're with, at work, at church, at home, driving down the road. But as miserable as they are, one great big truth that I've learned is I don't owe anyone an apology for my mental illness, and neither do you. Now, let's look back at Job's story. So Job is in a panic in the middle of the night. He's having symptoms that could maybe possibly appear to be psychosis. He's seeing and hearing things that aren't there, and Job is freaking the fuck out. Now, on top of what could possibly be argued as a panic disorder, Job is self-sabotaging like a boss. He's impatient. He's cursing the very day he was born. He's complaining that he didn't die as soon as he was born. He's complaining that now I'm stuck here and apparently the rest of my life will be lived in misery. Good old self-sabotage. It's one of the most common issues that I see when I first start a life coaching relationship or a spiritual direction relationship with people. Now, I want to read you a definition from Psychology Today talking about self-sabotage. Here's what they say. Behavior is said to be self-sabotaging when it creates problems in daily life and interferes with long-standing goals. Among the most common self-sabotaging behaviors are procrastination, self-medication with drugs or alcohol, comfort eating, and forms of self-injury such as cutting. So, why do people sabotage themselves? Well, here's what the article goes on to say. There are many potential reasons why a person might act in a way that proves damaging to his or her well-being. Some individuals, of course, spend much of their lives struggling with powerful cravings for food, drink, gambling, other temptations that come with painful costs to their health or relationships. But the forces that lead to self-sabotage can also be more subtle, such as an accumulation of dysfunctional and distorted beliefs that lead people to underestimate their capabilities, suppress their feelings, or lash out at those closest to them. An important aspect of dealing with counterproductive behavior is identifying where it might be coming from. So, what can you do about it? You're self-sabotaging. You know you're doing it. Other people have mentioned that word. It makes you cringe. You're uncomfortable. Oh, surely that's not me. But maybe it is. What do I do about it? So here's what I do. When I have a self-sabotaging thought, come into my world, when I have a limiting belief, I ask myself several questions. A list of seven things that I do. So, first, ask yourself if the belief is really true. Am I really the worst person on the planet? Are there, in fact, other historical figures I know of who have done things, thought things, or said things worse than me? Hitler, for instance. So ask yourself if the belief is really true. Second, determine the source of the belief. So when you hear that negative thought, where is it coming from? Is there an actual voice that you hear? Who does that voice belong to? More often than not, that voice belongs to someone who's unhealthy in your family tree. At least that's been my experience. The third thing, declare to yourself, and I like to do it out loud, I don't believe this anymore. This isn't true. And actually say it out loud. The fourth thing, pause for a minute and imagine what it would feel like to be free of this self-limiting, self-sabotaging belief. If you were free from this belief, what would your life feel like? How would your life change? Fifth, replace that limiting belief, replace that negative, self-sabotaging belief with a thought or a belief that counteracts it. So what is true about you? What is true about this situation? Maybe you dropped the ball. Okay. But rather than saying, I'm such a loser, what is the truth? And what if you tell yourself that truth? You know what? I totally dropped the ball. But even that, I totally dropped the ball. It's not a complete sentence. It's not a complete thought. So don't forget to add the word today to your sentence. I totally dropped the ball today. You don't always drop the ball. There are times you succeed. You aren't a total loser. You're not an idiot. You aren't a failure even if you fail. I'm going to say it again. You aren't a failure even if you fail. You are not a failure even if you have failed. You just dropped the ball today. So, the sixth thing, find evidence that there's a new belief and that new belief is valid. So maybe your new belief is, I'm a really great listener. Then slow down and think about specific times when your listening skills have been an encouragement to someone else. Back up your data, back up these beliefs with facts, because so often we believe things that aren't true. And then finally, the seventh thing, observe your new feelings, your new behavior, observe your results, observe how you feel with these new thoughts, because thoughts become things, right? Words create worlds. And so when you have this new thought, this new belief, and you begin to act on it, things start to shift. Now, let's get back to Job. So here's Job in the middle of the night, at the end of his rope, hopeless, alone, and Job hears that same inaudible voice that I heard the day I woke up when I nearly died by suicide. He saw that shapeless form when that warm hand I felt on my chest. The hope of God, the God of hope, showed up in the middle of this man's living hell. And you know it's God because Job hated himself. He wasn't saying kind things to himself. And here's what that inaudible voice said, again in the King James. In troubles 6 he will deliver thee. Yea, even in 7 shall no misfortune harm. In famine he will ransom thee from death. In battle from the power of the sword. In slander thou shalt be in safety hid. And when destruction comes, thou shalt not fear. At dearth and devastation thou wilt laugh. And of the beasts thou shalt not be afraid. thou shalt know that peace is in thy tent. And looking through thy home will nothing miss. And thou, in ripe old age, unto thy grave shall come. That's Job 5:19 through 26. In other words, I'm not finished with you yet. I've got your back. I've got this. Will you just trust me? So I want to remind you today, whatever you're recovering from, and we're all recovering from something, to be kind to yourself. Recovery is a long, difficult process. So don't think that you're going to leave church on Sunday and be radically healed. Don't think that you're going to turn off this video and suddenly everything's going to make sense and the sun is going to shine brighter than it's ever shone before. If you live with a mental illness, you already know this isn't a cold. It's not food poisoning. This is even more serious than a broken bone. Mental illness is chronic, but the symptoms are manageable. Once you know how to deal with them, once you build this strong support system, you will recover. You will get better. So be kind to yourself. One of the biggest components of healing, of recovery, of journeying toward wholeness is self-compassion. You have to stop hating yourself if you ever truly want to live. So how do you do that? Ignore the critics. You don't need their approval. Learn to ignore the haters. Set some boundaries. Let the jackass bray in the backyard till Jesus comes. But their opinion doesn't count. So what counts? What does matter? Grace. The grace of God and the grace of other people, it's all grace. And so once you let go of all the things you think you should be doing, once you stop trying to live up to the unrealistic expectations, the unrelenting expectations of other people who haven't walked even a quarter of a mile in your shoes, once you stop running and hiding and numbing and lying and covering up, once you stop doing all that, you'll begin to heal. You'll start the healing process. All grace asks, all God asks, all love made tangible asks is that you show up, that you tell the truth, that you admit the ways that you've been wounded, that you admit the stupid things you've done as a result of the pain that you've endured, and you let yourself be loved. Maybe for the first time, or maybe for the first time in a long time, you just sit and you close your eyes and you replace those thoughts and feelings of hatred, self-sabotage, and all the ways that you think you're not enough. And you listen to that still, small voice that says, I am God, and you are enough. I am God, and you belong to me. And I'm really sorry that you're hurting. I'm really sorry that you're depressed. I'm really sorry that you're anxious. I'm really sorry that this stuff just doesn't make sense right now. But you are loved because I am love. It is the essence of who I am. It is the essence of this relationship that we have going on, and I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. I will never turn my back on you. So will you just let go? Will you just trust? Will you just hold on one more day? Just one more day. Maybe you completely drop the ball today. but will you hold on and try again tomorrow? Because if I believe anything, it is that God is love, I am loved, you are loved, and our stories aren't over.